Hello, Peter Cohan.
Good afternoon, sir. How are you?
All right, so we're on the seventh episode of In the Spotlight. Thank you for taking the time, Peter. I'd just like to introduce you really quickly. Peter has been gracious to attend our podcast. Peter is a founder and principal of the Second Derivative and the author of two books, The Great Demo and Doing Discovery. Peter, you've trained thousands of practitioners, right, on your methodologies so far. And although you're located in one of my favorite places, Northern California, the best coast there is, you operate in all three regions of US, EMEA, and APAC, and you have practitioners all over the place.
These are all correct statements. And I have a third book on the way. So there you go.
Oh, wow. Northern California is one of my favorite places to do a road trip on the coast. Is one of the most beautiful areas.
That is exactly where we are. In fact, we are on the coast and about perhaps 12 miles as a crow might fly from the world's tallest redwoods, world's tallest trees.
Amazing. Let's start. I'd like to kick it off just like I do with every episode and ask you a really open question. What is value selling for you?
If you went online and you said, what is value selling? They're going to say it's a sales methodology where you're focusing on benefits and outcomes and the value associated with, if you will, those returns. But I think it's both easier and harder than that. And let me relate it in the form of a story. And that is way back last century when I was a young product line manager. We'd gotten to the point where we needed a tool to organize our enhancement requests and feature management and so forth. And I found a tool that fit our needs. I think it was somewhere around 35,000 or something like that at the time. And I went to my CFO and I said, John, we need this tool to solve this problem. And John said, no, you can't have it. And I said, but why? And he said, because you have not built a business case. And I said, oh, how do you build a business case? And he showed me how to do that. And a few days later, I was able to buy that product. Value selling at one level is enabling the buyer to build a business case that will succeed and move forward with a purchase. That I think is the simplest definition. Would you like a sort of a broader view?
Yeah, I think it's very interesting because I think there's a set of activities that go into the term value selling. And I think the most deliverable part is really the business case and the BVA or the business value assessment, depending on how broad you want to take it. But then we also know, I think you said something very clear, which is your CFO wanted a justification because CFO doesn't really care if you choose this product or that product. They just want to know I'm spending X, how am I getting back 3, 4X, and making sure I'm growing that company. But for you and for your manager, who was not the CFO, maybe manager's manager, who was not the CFO, because you're in a different function, you also wanted to solve a business problem and not
That's
just
right.
return the dollars. So what does that mean?
Yeah, and that's exactly how I put the business case together. Was what is it going to mean to avoid friction, slippage, lost opportunities, revenue that would be otherwise not generated as a result of a lack of particular features or functionality and so forth. So that was the process. But I want to go sideways and then come back to that for a moment because 100 years ago, there were very, very simple sales methodologies that appeared that basically focused on understanding customer needs. Those are the early ones. I mean, way back last century. And then there was evolution to solution selling, which basically said, let's understand the prospect's problems and present solutions. There was customer-centric selling that looked at, in theory, the whole process from the perspective of what does our customer need in order to solve their problems and so forth. And I want to suggest that perhaps the best way to articulate value selling today, to come back to this, is through the lens of buyer enablement. In other words, my job is no longer to sell, but is to enable my buyer or buyers to move forward successfully with their processes on a timeline that is coincident with their needs and timelines, and to make it as frictionless and easy as possible, all the way from the first engagement to, if you will, full customer lifetime value. So in a sense, that would be my evergreen definition of value selling. How's that?
Yeah, like it. So at the beginning of all of that is, as you said, the discovery or the understanding of the needs, and maybe even broader than just the needs. So maybe I'll start by just mapping this out. Where does discovery start, and where does it end?
Well, it starts with the very first interactions. I mean, that's kind of the easy answer. And the lazy person would say the discovery never ends. But in fact, you need to have certain waypoints so that you know you have completed certain things in order to progress. This actually happened to me several times when I answered bad questions accurately and correctly. So discovery begins at the very beginning. As you go through these various processes, you need to have waypoints. Well, one important waypoint is what has been termed a demo qualified lead. In other words, do we have enough information to be able to put together for a software sale a focused, precise demonstration based on what the prospect truly needs to form a solution for his or her processes? So a demo qualified lead then means you need to understand, in our case, when we're teaching methodology, 6 elements of information. What's this individual's job title? What's their critical business issue? What are their pain points or problems, reasons? What are the specific capabilities they are looking for in a solution? What's the value equation, which is where value selling again comes in? And is there a date by when this person needs to have a solution in place and what's driving it? So that represents a demo qualified lead, or the parameters to be able to call something a demo qualified lead.
So you're taking the demo as a pivotal milestone to judge the quality of your discovery.
However, I'm going to flip it around and say that one should not present any demo longer than about 5 minutes if you have not done sufficient discovery
Yep.
to be able to be sufficiently prepared. So what we're looking for here is to avoid the painful, stunningly awful harbor tour demo, which is, hey, let me grab an hour of your time, dear prospect, and show you everything I possibly could pack into a 1 hour overview demo. No,
Right.
we're escaping that era of pain.
Right, 100%. So the question is, do you mean sort of a teaser demo to earn the right to be able to spend more time? What is that 5 minute demo that is separate
Yeah.
than the fully discovered one?
So this is called a vision generation demo. And let's just set the scene very, very simply. Let's say you have come across a technology you're interested in exploring. You're not yet necessarily in an active buying process. You just want to learn about it. You just want to understand what is possible at a high level. So you reach out on a website and you click that book a demo button. And traditionally, what happens are a series of really annoying things. You get qualified by an SDR. You may have another call from a salesperson. And finally, if you meet all their criteria, you get a demo, which is often an overview of an hour. And it's too much for what you want. And you're annoyed by the time you're done with it. So instead, a vision generation demo is designed to satisfy your desire to get a sense of what's possible, and then you can make a mutual decision whether or not to proceed further into a richer discovery conversation. So vision generation demo says, what's your job title? Aligns that job title with a high probability use case or situation, and then shares a few visuals. So if, for example, you were the head of sales looking to potentially purchase a new CRM system, you'd be interested in seeing, all right, head of sales, I want to see the current forecast for this quarter, what's solid, what's not, where are the gaps. I want to look at the pipeline going out of the next 2 or 3 or 4 quarters, and I want to be able to inspect the major opportunities to understand who needs help, who needs coaching, where are their risks, and so forth. Those are probably 3 simple visuals that I would want out of the CRM system for me, or you in this case, as the head of sales. That's a vision generation demo. It's an appetizer not a 7-course meal.
And so if we go back to the discovery towards the full demo and the full discovery that we want to do, what are I mean, discovery has been discussed in the last few years quite a lot, and I think there's multiple things, articles and books. Yours is one of the core ones about it. But when you still talk to individuals today in 2025, what are they missing in the understanding of discovery?
The typical discovery call, I've listened to hundreds, if not thousands of these. The typical discovery call is a 30-minute engagement with a salesperson, most typically, that starts off with a few minutes of rapport building, then is followed with the real discovery session of about maybe 10 to 12 minutes, which is designed to identify and uncover some pains and to make sure those pains align with your offering. And then do not get in that salesperson's way as they rush into what is often a corporate overview presentation followed by the beginnings of a product overview or a demo. Total elapsed time of discovery, about 10 to 12 minutes. Total discovery information uncovered, pain points. And a little bit of technology stack or environment confirming that, yeah, this our product should fit in their environment and so forth. So that's the typical level of practice in the industry today. There are people that do it a lot better. There are people that do it worse, but that is the average. So what is missing? Everything else. Understanding related pains, impact, uncovering value, understanding cultural attributes, understanding other political pressures and issues within the prospect, understanding, are they experienced, are they inexperienced, what is the buying process that these go through, what is the proof process that they go through, and on and on. So discovery, really the iceberg metaphor. What most people do.
Why aren't they going that deep? What are they missing about the notion of discovery? Because I'm sure they want to know the politics, they want to know a lot of the stuff that you're talking about, but is it lack of understanding of how to ask the questions? Is it anxiety? Is it anxiety from friction? Like what is it that's blocking them from not getting to that depth?
I think it's a range of factors. For the less experienced vendors, reps, it's an anxiety that they need to sell. And the moment that the patient admits pain, they want to prescribe a solution. Oh, you've got a headache? Let's give you an Advil or aspirin. And they don't go any further than that. They feel a requirement to act rapidly in terms of presenting a solution. I think the second issue is really a Dunning-Kruger issue, and that is people don't know what they don't know. They don't think to ask about, hey, dear prospect, where do you perceive yourselves culturally? Where do you perceive yourselves on the technology adoption curve? And the answer to that question can speak volumes in terms of how long or how difficult and how successful this sales cycle or buying process might be. So number two is just, we don't know what we don't know. We don't even know to ask these cultural questions. We don't even know to ask questions associated with, how do you adopt technology? Do you do it all at once? Do you do it in waves? So that is, I think that's part of the difficulty here. And that, frankly, is why I wrote Doing Discovery, was to broaden people's thinking about what is discovery. I have a simple definition to answer. I have a simple definition to answer the question, how much discovery is enough? And it's when two cases are satisfied. Number one, when you as the vendor believe you have sufficient information to be able to propose a precise solution to your customer's situation or problems. That's the one that most people think about. The one that they don't think about is number two, where the prospect also feels you have gathered enough information to be able to propose a precise solution. That's the one that is not paid attention to. And that's the one, very frankly, that is most important. Does that resonate?
Yeah, 100%. I think, it goes back to really wanting to know how these things are happening on the customer side. The desire, as you say, not to solve, but to learn and know what's happening. I have a friend who basically said, imagine like you're sitting on a bar over a beer, and just trying to help the guy. Like you're not jumping into conclusion. You're having a conversation. You want to understand what's happening. It takes off the pressure of being a sales guy, right? Just be in the moment and just talk to the person and try and help them or understand what is happening. I think in one of the books, in the Qualified Sales Manager, John McMahon hires based on curiosity, right?
Mhm.
It all boils down to it's not about jumping to a solution, like you said. It's about having the curiosity, the skill, the know-how to want to know more. With that in mind, the next problem I think that comes in is the skill, which is sometimes you feel like you're interrogating and you want to know so much that it's starting to be an interrogation. And so what is needed to sort of earn the right and create the right dynamics to ask those questions?
So this is a really, really important topic. For complex offerings and complex situations, I typically recommend scheduling a 30-minute first call. And the objective of that call is really to satisfy the prospect's desires for whatever information they need. It could include a vision generation demo. It often includes the vendor revealing a price range, as opposed to saying, I need more information before I can tell you anything about pricing. Prospect needs to know, is this a possibility? So I want a price range. Answer questions about the services, the products that the prospect has. Perhaps begin to do a little bit of discovery. And then around the 25-minute mark, I would say something like, hey, Roy, there's a pile more questions I really need to ask to understand your situation more clearly and accurately. Should we schedule another call to pursue this? This is a wonderful watershed point because if the answer is no, no, I'm good, then what we have is somebody who's either not in an active buying process, just browsing, or we're not a good fit for whatever reason. That's fine. We branch, we put them on the nurture marketing list and nurture market them. On the other hand, if the prospect says, yeah, that's a good idea, let's set up a follow-on call. Now we know we have somebody who's truly interested, they're willing to invest the time mutually with us, and we can proceed forward. And here's why I think that approach works really, really well. Most of us as prospects do not want to talk to a salesperson until we're at the point where we really need a solution. And we need somebody who's skilled enough to help us craft that solution. That's what an excellent salesperson should really be doing, or selling team, I should say. So that first call, that first 30-minute or 25-minute call is really designed to satisfy the prospect's initial needs and desires for information collection. And then if they really want to move forward with pursuing it, now they're going to be much more comfortable and be willing to invest in another 30-minute or hour or perhaps longer. So that's part one. And the essence of that is quid pro quo, where what we're really doing is saying, I'm going to give you a bunch of stuff, and then in return, I'm going to ask for things. Now we apply that going forward, and let's say you and I schedule an hour discovery conversation after that 30-minute one. This is very common. We do not want it to feel like an interrogation. However, the mode has changed. The first call, you're cautious. You don't really know if you want to engage yet because you're not really trusting the salesperson. Second call, you've had a lot of your concerns managed, dealt with. And so you're much more willing to be open and answer questions. Notwithstanding that, we still want to make this a conversation. So you used curiosity, and that's one of my favorite methods of establishing quid pro quo. Anytime you as the vendor uncover something that's unusual or different, evince real curiosity. And you say, wow, that's really interesting. I've not seen that before. That is a quid pro quo. You're telling your prospect something that is different, unusual, interesting. Quid pro quo can be as simple as saying something like, you are not alone when a prospect reveals a pain or an issue. It's comforting. I'm not alone. Good. That means that you have experience in this, you understand, et cetera, et cetera. Offering small stories along the way are perfect quid pro quo. Oh, you know, there was another customer in a very similar situation to what you've articulated so far. They were able to blah, 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 blah. So
Allowing them to benchmark themselves. Yeah.
allowing to benchmark, that's a perfect description. So quid pro quo, remembering that you need to give something back to your prospect as part of the discovery conversation is critical. Here's a great one. Anytime you ask a question of your prospect and they say, oh, you know, that's a good question. That's actually a wonderful quid pro quo because what they have just realized is you've asked something that they should know.
That's
And they
actually a
go and
very good
research it.
point. And I connect that to a little bit of the challenger approach, right? Which is
Mhm.
if you ask them about obvious things, the answers are might be important to you as a seller, but might not be interesting for them in giving. But if you
Mhm.
ask them about where they're heading and how they're going to get there, nobody really knows exactly how they're going to get to that desired state that they want to be in and foresee all the possible challenges in getting there. It's not just a technology discussion. It's a process discussion. It's a people discussion, right? So you want to automate and scale something that today's blocked and bottleneck. Okay, great. So you have technology, but are you looking to scale this to other roles in the organization? Are you going to roll this out all at once? If I continue this conversation, I'm going to understand better how to be successful, regardless of what I'm buying or not buying from this person.
Yesterday, I was having a conversation with a pre-sales manager, and we were talking about his situation and his team, a lot of demographics information, what are their experiences like. By the way, this is a part of the discovery methodology that's very, very important. We can talk about in a moment. But at one point, I asked him, "So what's your churn rate like for your customers?" And he says, "You know, that's a really good question. I don't know." And today I got an email from him saying, "Well, I'm still looking up the churn rate, but what I've learned is our NRR is about 120%, which means that they're actually not just retaining well, but they're growing their customers." It's like I didn't even know we had that as a metric. Yes,
100%.
that's a quid pro quo.
Yeah, 100%. So, when you look at today's buyer, obviously we all talk about today's buyer is more informative. They come in much more ready. They have a lot more information available to them and the ability to do research and network. And you look at the discovery today versus 5, 10 years ago. What's the main difference in how discovery is evolving?
So you're touching on something that I call the myth of the informed buyer. Buyers today come into a sales process. Gartner and others say somewhere, what is it, 72% of the way through their process of the sales process, they engage a vendor. And the assumption is on both parts, in many cases, that your prospect knows everything they need to know about your offering, but they don't. They don't. You don't post everything on your public website that your offering does. It's not even possible to do that. So prospects don't know what they don't know. So one of the important elements of discovery that I think has changed a little bit over the past, let's say, 15 or 20 years, is helping your prospect, help first testing to see what they do know and what they don't, and then doing what is beautifully called vision reengineering. So a simple example of this would be, well, have you ever used Excel for forecasting? Okay, but at one point in your career, we all have.
Yeah.
And compare what you could do using Excel versus what you could use from a SaaS offering with dashboards and drill down capability and so forth. So if you're living in the world of an Excel environment, you're limited to what can you do with cells and simple graphs and formulas and so forth. You have no concept of what a modern dashboard might enable you to do, particularly with respect to drilling down multiple levels to information. So if I was a sales representative, part of my job, Roy, would be to say, well, if you're using Excel, here's what you're able to do. But imagine here are other options that you could do. Here's the value that's associated with being able to do those kinds of things. Here's some use cases perhaps you hadn't contemplated. So vision reengineering becomes a very, very important part of discovery that I don't think was recognized as important 5 or 10 or 15 or 20 years ago. Does that help?
Yeah, yeah. And I think what you're saying is a little bit like in other spaces, we have more data, but not a lot more information coming into the process. They're swamped with tons of data, but the core things are still sometimes missing and they don't know it. And what about the future? When you look at the AI capabilities that are being developed, the tools that are being injected into the space, where is discovery heading?
I think that is a very challenging question. At one endpoint, we could easily visualize two sets of agents, one for the vendor and one for the buyer. And they're interacting with one another, seeking the best solution at the best price for the culture and the community that they're each representing. That to me is one very logical outcome, and I could see it taking place. However, everything's going to have bias, right? So there'll be human bias that's going to be has to be accounted for. What we're seeing more and more, I would say, is AI supported discovery. So discovery by humans currently being helped or supported by AI engines that are saying, hey, there's an area here you should have looked at, or here are some examples of use cases you could offer your prospect, and so forth. Um, I think those are currently less real time than real time, but it will probably move towards real time in the future. I think you'll see agents actually helping both parties. Absolutely, which is where I think things certainly could go. But it will take a long time, I think, before these tools really become sufficient to do the whole task themselves.
Of course.
And one of the challenges for AI is exactly what you said. Can AI be curious? That will be an interesting thing.
Amazing. I 100% agree with the view, and I think we're in a very pivotal point. We talk about this at Spotlight as a squad of agents that can basically live with you or come to the meetings with you and
Yeah.
understand an aspect. I think what one of the name of the book is going to come back to me, but there's the active listening on multiple levels. Once a customer is talking, and it's very difficult to do as one person, being able to have agents that help you listen on all those levels and understand, sentiment and specific data you're looking for, and org charts and politics and all of those dimensions of discovery. I think those assistants will be very powerful in helping, especially the junior reps that are coming in and still learning the business they're selling and learning how to sell.
There's a wonderful spectrum, a progression, the DIKW. Are you familiar with this?
No.
Data, information, knowledge, wisdom. And I think where we are today is collecting tons of data, working in many cases to characterize that data into information. And that's about as far as most systems are going today. They talk about knowledge, but knowledge is a synthesis of the information. So an example, I just did a post on this recently. So imagine that you're looking at a frozen lake or pond and you're contemplating crossing it. Well, the data is that it's below freezing. The information is you can see a sheet of ice across the pond, and you may have an idea of how thick it is in places, but you can't see beyond that. The knowledge is, well, maybe we should test this out in some way before crossing this ice. Wisdom is, let's carry some self-rescue equipment if we have to cross this ice, just in case one of us breaks through. And of course, we could add one level to this, which is deeper wisdom, where my wife says to me, Peter, you go first. But
Nice.
that progression, I think, is what we have to think about as we look at training people as humans, and as we look at how to apply AI to enable humans to do what we do better.
Amazing. Peter, I could talk to you about discovery for another hour easily. Thank you so much for taking the time. Just to mention again to our audience, go read the books, The Great Demo and Doing Discovery. I think those are amazing pieces of the sales cycle, and you can learn a lot from these books. Peter, thank you so much for the time today.
I am so glad we were able to invest this time together.